Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 237 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by jaysfromthecouch.com. Let's try that again. We're glad you're tuning in, whether it's on our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. We're super happy that you're here with us, and welcome. I am your host, as always, Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. We've got an awesome episode for you. Lots to talk about, including a new old signing. Robbie Ray will be returning to the Toronto Blue Jays, whether you like it or not. We've got some more rotation discussion. We've got a couple of ideas for you, and we'll even, if we have time, we'll get to some projections for some of the hitters of your Toronto Blue Jays. Before we get there, I'm going to remind you, this show is coming at you live on YouTube, Facebook. You can tune in every week as we go live. We record. We're bringing this video to you just because we are that good looking. And we're, I of course, am including everybody else. But no, in all seriousness, we're trying something new here. We're bringing this live broadcast to you. You can participate by adding comments and questions directly while you're watching, and they'll show up here on the show. It's a pretty cool feature. We're super excited about that. And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter at Jays from Couch, Facebook, obviously, like our Facebook page there. And don't forget the podcast. If you can't tune in because your kids are running around or you got too much work to do, whatever it is, you can always catch the podcast when it's convenient for you. The audio version can be on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find a podcast, you'll find Jays from the Couch Radio. So before we dive into all this, I'm going to bring in my guests this week to help me break down this Toronto Blue Jays. I don't even know what you want to call it. I guess we'll call it a start to the offseason. But I've got Jays from the Couch writer Karen Sutar. Good evening.
Good evening, Sean.
How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
I am doing just fine. Thank you for asking. Since
Good.
nobody tuning in on YouTube or Facebook has asked me yet. So, Karen,
no.
Thank you.
Yikes.
All right. And as always, we've got our special Pennsylvania correspondent, Steve Ficchetti, who just came off some election duty. We're not going to get into the results or anything like that here. I'm sure that there's another podcast somewhere on Apple or Google that you can find to listen in on that. However, we are going to be joined by our American contributor, Steve. Good evening to you.
Hi, Sean. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
What a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Yes. For sure.
Steve just likes being busy.
Yeah, I like being busy, and to all my Canadian friends and relatives, you don't have to worry about going to war. You don't need to bomb us into submission. The nightmare is over, so you can focus on more important things like opening the border.
Yeah, no, we're still not opening the border. Easy now.
I'm not sure open the border, even if there wasn't COVID, but that's a whole different conversation, different kind of show. So,
absolutely. So instead, we'll talk about the Toronto Blue Jays. Some big-ish news in signing Robbie Ray, who we saw for a little bit near the end of the ridiculous 2020 season, and the Blue Jays took a flyer on him. Right, they just took a gamble. This guy, leads the planet when he's good on strikeouts, but hasn't been that guy for a while. And the Toronto Blue Jays tried it out, and actually, instead of walking everybody in the National League, he came over and he reduced his walks per 9 innings, which is positive. So Toronto must have liked what they saw in his brief time there. So Karen, I'm going to start with you. $8 million, 1 year of Robbie Ray. Sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things for baseball, it's really not. Actually, I remember just talking to Mark Shapiro once, and he told me that the Toronto Blue Jays value one win above replacement at $9 million. So really, Robbie Ray has got a bar, right, in order to be quote unquote worth it. And I hate describing people like that. But he's got to put up a win, right, to be to make that money look reasonable. My question to you, Karen, is, first of all, is it a good signing? Is it not a good signing? What are your thoughts?
Right. I'm I'm kind of lukewarm on it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I mean, we got to look at him in 2020. He pitched in 5 games in the regular season and 3 innings in the playoffs. And I mean, he wasn't great. He wasn't terrible. When I looked at his numbers with the Diamondbacks, he did improve a fair bit with the Jays. Now he still had his problems with issuing way too many walks, and hopefully for him to be back next year, hopefully he can cut that down even further. It was like 9 walks per 9 innings with Arizona, which is just like what? And he cut it down quite a bit to 6.1 with the Jays, which is still way too high, but it's also a significant drop. So, I mean, the guy's got some talent when he can figure it out and throw strikes. One thing that kind of strikes me, I mean, aside from just Robbie Ray himself, is what this says about the Blue Jays and where they might be at this off season, because I mean there have been people, more than one person, a number of people who have questioned Charlie Montoyo's use of the pitching staff, and I don't know how many people I saw on Twitter. Yes, hello, Steve. We know you're like number one, number one in that regard, but you're not the only one. And I don't know how many people I saw on Twitter during the playoff games saying, there isn't a free agent pitcher in baseball who will sign with the Blue Jays once they've seen how the Jays management treats their pitchers. That on top of the usual challenges the Jays have in signing any free agents, playing in Toronto, foreign country for most people, the higher taxes, and then not even knowing where the heck they're going to play in 2021. A lot of people thought it would be next to impossible to sign a free agent. Well, they just signed a free agent, and they did so on November the 7th. It's not like it was mid-February and this guy didn't have any other offers. Are you telling me Robbie Ray didn't think that he would have any other opportunities, any other decent opportunities with other teams? I've got to believe that he re-signed with the Jays because he wanted to. And I think that's a good sign. And I'm that much more hopeful that if they want to sign other guys, and I think they do, that they've got a real shot at doing it.
It's a fair point. Fair point. Steve, with regard to, I have an idea for Robbie Ray, but before we get there, Steve, I wonder your initial thoughts on signing a guy who had difficulty limiting free passes.
Well, I mean, naturally, that's going to haunt him. He could go a season to win a Cy Young, and somehow it's going to be mentioned. Well, he always has control problems. It's the nature of the beast. We have to have something to talk about. Fans have to have something to complain about. But I mean, $8 million for a pitcher who has upside that is tremendous, it's a bargain. And as Karen alluded to, I think it says a lot about where the Blue Jays are and how the organization is explaining what they're trying to do to their players. For him to forego possibly going out on the free market, and coming back and pitching for the Blue Jays again, and probably in an uncertain role. We really don't know exactly. Is he going to be a bullpen guy? Is he going to be a swing guy? We had an article earlier in the week talking about a 6-man rotation, which I love. I love the 6-man rotation idea, at least for the first couple of months of the season. So I think it was a win-win. Robbie Ray knows where he's going to pitch. He knows the staff he's going to pitch for. And he has to feel good about the fact that the Blue Jays believe that what they saw in that limited amount is the real Robbie Ray, and not the walking machine that he was in Arizona.
Yeah, no, and I think I agree with both of you. I think there's a couple of things, or at least certainly one thing that I might add to that, and that is I think what the signing does, and Karen, you bring up a good point. Well, it seems like he kind of jumped at the opportunity to sign in Toronto again, and part of me wonders if him and his people, his agent or whoever, kind of say or read what everybody else is saying, that this is going to be an odd off season, and let's just take money when it's right there in front of us. But what I also like about it is that they pulled what they did with Edwin Encarnacion, in that they offered somebody what they thought was fair value. They didn't mess around. They didn't try to lowball. They didn't try to give them, what do they call it, a hometown discount or whatever you want to call it. They paid him, and really, I think, more than I would have expected Robbie Ray to get. And maybe he just jumped at it. But the bigger takeaway for me with all of this is that they spent $8 million on a Robbie Ray. That's got to be on the low end of what they expect to spend. There's got to be something else, in my mind. There has to be something else, because Robbie Ray is not going to put this team deeper into the postseason. Robbie Ray is not going. And as Steve said, he may not even be a starter all year, right? And so there has to be more. Obviously, they're not done, but I think the type of more is what I'm more interested in. If Robbie Ray is the first thing they do at $8 million, they're not afraid to spend money, which is great. But what is that next move? I have a feeling it could be quite tasty. The idea I had, though, for Robbie Ray is, and this is just off the top of my head, and I feel like with his issues, as Steve said, he'll be labeled a guy who has he's a walker, right? He just walks everybody. But with the high strikeout, I wonder if the starting thing doesn't work out, if shorter stints of Robbie Ray near the back end of a bullpen might be a rather interesting idea to explore. Now, the problem with that, of course, is the leverage situations and issuing free passes. So I acknowledge that. However, when you have somebody who can strike out as many people as he does, maybe spending $8 million on a back-end guy isn't so bad. So maybe he starts in the rotation and works his way out of it, or, because right now I could be closing for the Toronto Blue Jays in 2021, right? So I'm doing my exercises now. I'm working with weighted balls and all of that stuff. But back to the previous point that, I think there's more to come. I guess, Karen, I'll start with you. What is that more? First of all, let's even just stop with stay with the starting rotation. Is there more to come with the starting rotation in your mind?
I believe there's at least one more move, whether that be a free agent signing or by trade, and there's different possibilities out there. I still really like what we saw from Taijuan Walker, so I think that could be very interesting if they could bring him back for whatever, 2 years plus an option. Whatever that worked out to be, or there's a trade, or my husband and I were talking earlier today, and he thinks they should take a chance on Chris Archer. Myself, I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately. It's been a few years since he's been the good Chris Archer that we came to know, but there's possibilities out there. None of them named Trevor Bauer, if it's up to me, but
oh yes, so much yes, Karen. I couldn't agree more. Now, Steve, I know that you are a fan of Chris Archer, and I personally wouldn't hate that. I'm not saying spend $8 million on a Chris Archer, but I wouldn't hate it. But I guess the question is, at this point, Steve, when you look at the Toronto Blue Jays rotation, what would, or should they do to start the 2021 season?
Well, I'm a big believer that they should try to leverage via the trade market getting the rotation filled out. It doesn't mean that you can't sign a James Paxton, or you can't sign even a Tanaka, I don't know that Tanaka would necessarily come here. I think he wants to be a Yankee, or he's going to go back to Japan. But just to go to Chris Archer for a second, that is a tough surgery to try to bounce back from. But we're talking about you're getting a rib removed, you're having all kind of stuff in there, and not a lot of pitchers come back from it the same guy. But we were talking about leverage innings. Could you bring Chris Archer, who has a variety of different breaking stuff, 2 kinds of fastballs, put him at the back of the bullpen, signing him to an incentive-laden contract, and have him pitch out of the bullpen? Personally, I think you got to pass on Chris Archer. There are enough other options out there, and I love Chris Archer. He's one of my favorite pitchers ever. But I really think, as Karen said, the ship has sailed, and it's sailing into the rocks and the shallows. And I don't think it's gonna. I don't know that it's gonna sink, but I don't think it's ever gonna pick up speed again. So.
Right. So for me, where I'm looking at this rotation, they could, in theory,
Fortunate.
it is unfortunate about Chris Archer. But I am going to preface all of this with a in theory, on paper qualifier here, right? So in theory, on paper, the Toronto Blue Jays could start the 2021 season with a rotation as it is right now. Does that mean they should? No. However, they do have Ryu, they have Rourke, they now have Robbie Ray, they have Nate Pearson. Nobody really knows what Nate Pearson's workload is going to look like, but they do have a rotation that they could start the season with when you include Anthony Kay, Thomas Hatch, and some other kind of lower level. I don't want to say lower level, but less experienced. That's what I was going for. I knew I'd get there eventually. But they do have enough that they could cobble together a rotation if they struck out on everything this offseason. So, if you're looking at where are they going to upgrade the rotation, it has to be something of quality, whether that's through trade, whether that's through free agent signing. Like, yes, Trevor Bauer is somehow the cream of the crop this year, but that just really tells you about the crop, really. Anyway, so free agency may not result in what the Toronto Blue Jays need. They could take as Steve said, they could take a chance on a James Paxton. They could maybe trade, right? We heard a while ago, and maybe a while ago, like a few years ago, back when the Chicago Cubs were were the franchise, just winning World Series and all of that stuff, and they came up with Rizzo and Bryant. And we heard at the time, though, that a strategy was stock your system full of position players and trade for pitching, right? Because pitching is so difficult. High-level pitching is so difficult to draft and develop. So instead, go the other way. High-quality position players and then trade for them. So maybe that is an option that the Blue Jays could pursue, because now if you look at their system, there are more position players than they've had in a while that are of high quality. Regardless, there's a lot of different ways they could go. And Jim here points out that Major League Baseball trade rumors today said that Joe Musgrove of the Pirates is in play. And I guess the question for this group here, Karen, we'll start with you, is do you see him as an option for the Toronto Blue Jays?
I mean, it's a possibility. I know his name has kind of been tossed around, and I've looked at his stats, and myself, I've been a little underwhelmed. Now, I think maybe Steve might be the better person to ask about him. I think Steve might be a little bit more familiar with what he has done and the potential of what he could do going forward. If you don't mind me sidestepping a little bit in terms of pitching, one name that we haven't really talked about a lot, and it's somebody they've already got in house. I wonder how they plan to use Ross Stripling. Like, could he be useful at all?
Well, let's put a pin in Stripling because I have thoughts. And there's a reason why I asked you first, Karen, about Joe Musgrove, because I knew the resident Pennsylvanian. Is that what Steve? Is that what people from Pennsylvania are called? Pennsylvanian?
Well, in Pittsburgh, I think they're called jagoffs. But yeah, Pennsylvanian, I think is the dictionary word that would be applied to us Keystoners. I guess Keystoner would be another one.
All right,
but it makes you seem like you're part of a double play combination if you call yourself a Keystoner. So true. Pennsylvania we'll stick with that.
All right, fair enough. So, but you would have experience with the Bucks, the Pittsburgh Pirates. So, Joe Musgrove, is he a logical option for the Blue Jays?
Oh, I think it would be a terrific acquisition for the Blue Jays. As Karen said, if you look just at your normal pitching stats, it's it's ERA, above 4. But Bucks rhymes with yuck. Okay. I cannot tell you how awful the Pirates were in 2019. And if that wasn't bad enough, defensively and all across the board, fundamentally, the Pirates in 2020, thank God it was only a 60 game. Everything else about the season being 60 games, I was really sad about. I didn't have to watch that every day. Okay. If you look at his defense adjusted ERA, it's a half a run, if not a little bit higher, better than his actual earned run average. And in many cases, the Pirates are the only MLB team that I see consistently screwing up the shift. Every other team benefits from the shift, not the Pirates. So a lot of the runs that will go as earned runs for their pitchers, Musgrove, Trevor Williams, Chris Archer, to a degree, was a victim of bad luck, and he let it get to him because it was really getting to be way too regular. So looking just at his general numbers is not fair. And generally, I'm not an analytics guy, but in the case of Joe Musgrove, his value, when he's on the mound, he is in control. He is Ryu who shows emotion. So he would be a wonderful addition to a young staff. And plus, he was a former #1 draft pick of the Blue Jays. The Astros insisted on him being included in that infamous trade between Houston and Toronto. So obviously, a couple of organizations have seen a lot in him, and I think it would be terrific. The only caveat that I put is that I really think in their division, the Rays heavily left-handed as far as their successful lineups. Yankees, pretty left-handed. Boston, the Baltimore, I don't think it really matters. I mean, Baltimore, you must have a pitch back there that you're throwing to and see where the ball lands. But those three teams, if you brought in another left-hander, which is where Paxton, the only value to me with bringing Paxton in and giving it a chance is that he's a left-hander, and in that division, that could bring him more value than a Musgrove or other people that we've kicked around and talked about. But by all means, I say Joe Musgrove, do not just look at the numbers. Joe Musgrove is a winner, but he's pitching for a really bad losing team. Put him in Toronto, I think you're talking about 12, 13, 14 game winner, no problem.
Right. And so I'm just pulling up his page here in Fangraphs. 12.5 strikeouts per 9 in 2020. Very good. His walks were increased a little bit. What I found very interesting, though, the exit velocity off of him is quite low at 85, the average, and he managed to decrease that from the previous season. Put up a solid 1 win above replacement. But you're right. When you look at his ERA versus his FIP, it is almost half a run higher. And as you said, you could probably attribute that to anybody behind him more so than him. So I guess, Steve, the question is, you knowing Pittsburgh, the Pirates, better than Karen or I, what would it take in your mind? Now, realistically speaking, what would the Pirates be looking for? What do they need, I guess, is a question.
They need to literally just strip down and become an expansion team. Volunteer to become an expansion team and just start from scratch. And that's why Ben Cherington took the job. He was committed. He was in a great place in Toronto. He said he wanted a chance to basically start from scratch, and that's exactly what's going to happen in Pittsburgh. That and Ben Cherington is the wild card. And I think that's why the deal hasn't happened yet, because in the back of Ross Atkins' mind, he has to be nervous about the players that Cherington is going to ask for, because Cherington is the architect of the farm system. Yes, he was part of the team. His fingerprints are the most prominent on the Blue Jays farm system. So I would imagine that, Randall Grichuk was talked about coming to Pittsburgh. This is before Ben Cherington, but before he went to Toronto. I would think any combination of young arms.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
me
did you
too.
say something?
No,
Okay.
I'm waving. I'm
Okay.
waving goodbye to Grichuk.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, Grichuk, I love Grichuk, but he can bring you a lot. I've heard Rowdy Telez's name kicked around. I think the name that's going to come over here is Alek Manoah. He played college ball in our backyard. I've seen him pitch in person. I would find blackmailing pictures of Ross Atkins and say, these get released unless you put Manoah in any deal that we make.
No,
Okay,
no,
so
no. He stays here.
do I think the Blue Jays should do it? No, but I think that Cherington could pull it off if he's willing to take on. Not that Grichuk is a horrible contract, but again, it frees up more run for the Blue Jays to spend in free agency, not only now but in future years. So Ben Cherington is going to extract a piece that I don't think any of us are thinking of. And then we're going to look at it 3 or 4 years down the road and say, oh my God, why did the Blue Jays do that?
Then don't
I
do
would
it.
be, yeah, exactly. I would be shocked, in all honesty. And Steve, I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense logically. I just find it more so than any front office I have seen. This front office exercises restraint, and more so than JP Ricciardi, obviously. BJ Ryan. Hello.
He was good for 1 year.
He absolutely was. Way more so more restrained than Alex Anthopoulos.
Oh God,
obviously. Like
Night
it
and
doesn't
day.
have to be. Yeah, exactly. But in a long time, I haven't seen a front office this kind of. I don't even know what the word is. Controlled. Like it's they're saving for something. At some point, you can't have your entire system on the Rogers Center field, right? So something's got to give. And the question is whether it's this offseason, whether Joe Musgrove is the guy. I just find that I find it difficult to imagine that this front office would give up what would be required, especially if it's a Manoah. Like I just don't see
I don't know.
them, like.
Well, now it's not going to be just Musgrove that's going to come to Toronto.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that Adam Frazier, he's a nice utility guy. He somehow manages to be a Gold Glove finalist every year. And I'm obviously watching an alternate reality version of what's going on out there. But I mean, the Pirates have talked about putting some of their younger prospects also on a deal if they're going to get a big piece from Toronto. And the new name is O'Neill Cruz, because he had the unfortunate situation where he was behind the wheel and struck several people on a motorcycle, fatally, killing them. So, I mean, it's not going to be like a Felipe Vasquez situation where he's going to go to jail per se, but the Pirates are very jumpy about that. We've always talked about how the Blue Jays are trying to create a culture. I think the Pirates, after the Vasquez situation and some of the other things that happened in 18 and 19, once there's a cloud over a player, they're going to move him. O'Neill Cruz is, 6'3", 6'4", can play short, can play third, can play the outfield. He can hit. He's a great defender. If you're going to put an O'Neill Cruz in a deal, then you can say, look, I want Manoah, or Simeon Woods Richardson's not going anywhere. But, the Blue Jays have depth in their minor league pitching as well. And that's why I always go back to Cherington being a wild card, where he knows who he could perhaps get added to the deal. If it's not Manoah, we'll look back at it in a couple of years and saying we made a mistake there. It was, unless you win a World Series in a year or two, we made a mistake giving up on this guy.
Right. And I think what I guess my reaction to that is Joe Musgrove is not going to bring a World Series to Toronto. Right. So he's not going to be the piece. Could he be a piece? Absolutely.
Right.
But I think, I'm with Karen here that if that's the cost, and I'm not bringing over somebody who has that dark cloud that you just referred to, if I'm.
And the Jays wouldn't do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I am sure there are pieces to be made available to bring Joe Musgrove to Toronto. There are pieces. We've seen them bring in guys for next to nothing, really. Really, you're not going to miss anybody who they gave up for a Chase Anderson or whatever have you, right? So there are pieces. I share the reverence for Mr. Cherington, but I also think that Toronto's front office is very smart as well. And I don't see them blowing the farm, as it were, on a Joe Musgrove. Now, if there's somebody else out there, I can't even think off the top of my head who would be, that guy, like a Walker Buehler from the Dodgers. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Right. But that's the kind of guy where I would be like, give him whatever you want. Here, you can take my 3-year-old. Take him. Don't really, because you'll have buyer's remorse very quickly. I joke.
If you don't mind me circling back just for a second there. So Steve was talking about the possibility of trading away Randall Grichuk, and there being value in that for the Jays because, and it's not a terrible contract in MLB terms, but getting that money off the Jays books is money that they could spend elsewhere. If they're going to do that, I'd kind of like to see them do it in the other way, in that if they're going to trade him to a team that doesn't want to spend as much money as maybe the Jays are going to, and if somebody values Randall Grichuk, kick in half of his salary if it makes him that much more valuable and allows them to hold on to more of their prospects. That's what I'd rather see.
Yeah. I would rather spend money than prospects at this point. Yeah. Now, if they were just, that much closer to a championship, then I would say, well, screw it, who cares? Before we move on to our projections here, I just want to quickly bring up this one. If Aaron Sanchez agreed to come back on an inexpensive reliever deal, should the Blue Jays gamble on him? Steve, what are your thoughts?
No.
Fair.
Just flat out. No, I can't be any more emphatic than that. Yeah. No.
Karen, how about yourself?
it might be worth a gamble. I mean, how inexpensive are we talking about? If he doesn't get a lot of offers, could they get him like they did, for example, AJ Cole on a minor league deal without being guaranteed a roster spot? Then I would take a chance. Give him a shot to pitch in spring training and show that he's still got something left in the tank, because he might. Once upon a time, he was a high prospect, and he had a bit of success in MLB, and then that all got derailed due to injuries. It's very sad. So under
Yeah.
those terms, I'm not sure I'm guaranteeing a roster spot on him.
No, but I would a minor league deal, like, that's nothing. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really cost you anything. Throw spaghetti at the wall, see if it sticks, and if it does, great. If it doesn't, okay, next. Nothing lost, right?
I don't know. I think the Jays are to the point, especially with the depth of young pitching, that you don't potentially clog up even spring training innings with a guy like Aaron Sanchez, who is probably on the downslide of his career. That's why I said no right off of the bat. I think that the Blue Jays are in a better position pitching than maybe a lot of people want to give credit for. So Aaron Sanchez, I think, just gets in the way. That sort of is the same way I'm thinking about Chris Archer. I think that in order to see what you have, he's going to take valuable innings away from a younger guy in spring training who could fill out the rotation. Mm-hmm. So I just don't see it being. I mean, and I think Aaron Sanchez has done everything he possibly could to make it back from injury, and I just think he's one of those put a fork in him, he's done guys, unfortunately.
Right. So, Karen, I'm going to start with you on this one here. Would Mr. Yu Darvish be on your radar, Karen?
I mean, how much is left on his contract? Is it a year? Is it more than a year?
Pulling it up right now for you. He's at, oh Lord, 6 year, $126 million, signed through 2023.
Okay, and I've lost track a bit. How has he been doing the last year or two?
So in 2020, he started 12 games, 76 innings, strikeout rate of 31 in the third, walk rate of 4.7, ERA 2.0, and 3 wins above replacements.
Oh, that's pretty darn good. I mean, would they trade him? What would the Jays have to give up to get him? And how old is he now?
He is, I just had it, 34 years old.
Ooh, okay, that's a bit of a deal breaker for me. If he's got that many years left at that kind of money, and what would the Jays have to give up potentially to get him? How much longer is he going to be good? I don't see a fit there with their competitive window and when they're likely to be serious contenders. So I think when the Jays are really getting to be good, he'll be going in the other direction. So I don't think that works.
So, Steve, I'm going to throw it to you. However, I might throw this at you. If we recall back to the 92-93 seasons, there were veteran pitchers brought in to I don't want to say improve the rotation, but it did do that. Kind of enhance it. And is this something, the Yu Darvish idea, is that, and granted, Karen is right, he's expensive. Let's be real here. Would you consider Yu Darvish?
If I believed that the Blue Jays are an ALCS contender this year, then yes, I do, because you've got 3 years left on the contract. You want 2 years out of them. So if you think you're ready to go to the ALCS, maybe the World Series the next year, okay, then you're pulling a Dave Stewart or a David Cohn or all the guys that they brought in. You can do that. I personally don't think they're quite there yet. So that's where the cost becomes, I think, way too heavy as far as what you might be able to do in 2 or 3 years to actually push the team, over the top. So I think it really boils down to how do Shapiro and Atkins view the Blue Jays right now? Are they able to go to the ALCS this year? I say no. A lot of people seem to think yes. So I think it's really going to boil down to them. And as you said, they tend to be cautious. Shapiro has always spent, when he knew down deep in his heart his team was good enough to really make a splash, not just make the playoffs, but make a splash and make a deep run. And I don't know if he really, or Atkins really, believe that they're there right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If they can adjust and add to their starting rotation and say, now we're ready for, we made the playoffs, now we're ready to advance another round or whatever have you. If they were in that boat, ready for that next round, then a Yu Darvish might make sense, right? To get them one round further for, and I know that one player isn't going to do that. For those of you tuning in live on YouTube or Facebook, I understand that. Last one here. Would David Price be on your radar? My answer is a hard no. However, Karen, how about you?
Yeah, tentatively no as well. I think his best days are behind him. If we could get 2015 David Price back, but we can't. We don't have a time machine. I think he hasn't. He signed the huge contract and immediately has not looked like the same pitcher since. And he didn't pitch in 2020. He opted out, which I have no problem with. But I don't know how much he has left in the tank. So I'm not sure how much he would help. And he's very expensive.
Yeah, it's almost
31 million a year.
It's almost like signing a guy for 100 years and $1 billion is not a good idea. Who knew?
What a concept.
Bobby Bonilla still gets paid $1 million every year until I guess until we have robot players, I guess he's going to keep getting paid. So, right, you got to be careful now. To play devil's advocate with David Price, do I think that you would acquire, A1 David Price? No, but David Price is a name player. David Price, you could sucker another team in to trade for. So I think in theory, you could turn eating the money on David Price for 1 year into some very valuable assets. But I still would say no. If you're going to spend $30 million, and I know it's going to make you guys cringe, then spend $30 million on Trevor Bauer. If you're really going to just throw stupid money around and become Trevor Bauer. And again, being close enough to Cleveland, I get to see a lot of Cleveland Indian games when he was in Cleveland. Obviously, I saw him pitch last year, against Pittsburgh and against other teams. He has something about him where if you had to win a game, I would put the ball in Trevor Bauer's hand. He's no Tanner Roark, but I would put the ball, in his hand. I would feel totally comfortable. And I would basically just block his Twitter feed so I wouldn't have to read it and just enjoy watching him pitch a big game for the Blue Jays. But again, I don't think we're there. You don't spend that kind of money on anybody at this point. You don't spend that kind of money, and that includes Francisco Lindor or JT Real whatever,
Yeah.
I know everybody wants Francisco Lindor is a wonderful player. He's not coming to the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are not going to get a chance. and they would be the perfect fit because they've got the farm system depth and they've got some major league players. Randall Grichuk, you don't think the Indians would love to have Randall Grichuk in the outfield? They may pay extra money to the Blue Jays just to get Randall Grichuk in their outfield because their outfield's horrible. You cannot commit that kind of money to a player of Lindor's skill set. And I know this is probably a question for a whole different podcast. I just don't. And he is a wonderful player. He is not where you spend big and put all your money in. He is not the guy that's going to carry you to a World Series.
Well, I am just, all I'm going to say to that is I would pay for him. I would trade for him. And if they want Randall Grichuk, even better. I would bring Francisco Lindor to Toronto so fast. And I would pay him $30 million a year. Absolutely, I would. It's only money. I don't care. Is he going to bring a championship? Probably not. However, he's going to get you pretty darn close, right? Like,
but then why spend $30 million? Sign me for $30 million. Well, I mean, there's all kind of players like that you just don't. Okay, I mean, Trevor Bauer. Okay, as far as a pitcher goes, he's that kind of guy. Okay,
unless he's been using his hands to play with drones and cuts his hand and has to be taken out of a playoff game, which I went to.
Well, we all know about Blue Jays players and using their hands, so we don't really want to go down that road, I don't think. Ooh. Can you tell I'm really still bitter about Reese McGuire?
Well,
and I'm not really, I mean, I'm a Blue Jay fan first, and then, obviously I follow the Pirates being here in Pittsburgh. That was just one of the stupidest number one draft picks, and the Pirates cornered the market on stupid number one draft picks. But if you're going to spend $30 million on a player that's not going to get you there, then go for Yu Darvish, go for Trevor Bauer, go for David Price. Because I mean, it'll put people in the seats if we ever get to put people in the seats. It'll get people all excited and get talking. But if he's not going to put you there, then it makes no sense.
All right.
You go to a player like Chapman in Oakland, and who I know you love, Sean, then you pay him and maybe another player with that same $30 million, and you are in the World Series.
Perhaps. We are just about out of time, and this is such a good question. I couldn't leave it for the next episode. Michael has a great question here, and I think it's one that we can answer, but it's such a good question. We can answer it quickly, but I didn't want to just leave it hanging there. So, Karen, let me start with you. Do you think the Blue Jays need some veteran players? And I guess really, I think we can all agree that the answer is probably yes. But, Karen, how badly do they need them?
That's a good question. It would really help. I think if you get the right one or two guys in who've been around, who understand. I mean, even Eric Sogard in 2019. Now, we all know that was a nothing year for the Jays, at least on the field. But we heard so much about his veteran leadership and so forth. And so, yeah, having that kind of player around, I think that would benefit them a lot.
Steve, how badly do they need a veteran player, or two or three?
I think it would be extremely beneficial, take a little bit of the pressure off of the young guys who I think are putting a little bit too much pressure on themselves. And I think, again, that's where the Musgrove and Pirate connection comes in. There's a lot of veteran players in Pittsburgh. They're not necessarily great players, but they can certainly help you out. I mean, Colin Moran is an underrated corner infielder. He can play both first and third. Gregory Polanco has his moments. You can't play him every day anymore. But if you can add guys like that to a Musgrove deal and the asking price coming back isn't that bad, I mean, that's a perfect place to be looking for veteran players.
Right. All right. And we've seen Toronto do that before, right? Where they take on somebody's bad contract to get what they really want. I whatever helps me when I'm sitting on my couch and I'm watching the game, and whatever stops Vlad from taking an extra base, because that's experience, right? Like, and a little bit of age. as well. But whatever stops the bonehead stuff, and if veteran players are what you need to do it, then I'm all in. I would pay them quite a bit, quite handsomely, if they had that kind of impact on the rest of the roster. Because OMG, I can't. And I'm thinking that one time when Vlad rounded third and he watched it scoot away, and you could see it in his face. I think I can make it. Oh, I'm going to wait. Yeah, I'm going to go. And you're just sitting there going, what are you doing? Anyway, so if we can get a veteran in there to clean up all that, then I'm all for it. All right. But we are out of time. Thank you to my two veterans, Jays from the Couch contributors, Karen Sutar and Steve Ficchetti. Karen, let everybody know how they can follow you and all that stuff.
Yes, I'm on Twitter at Karen Sutar1. That's SOUTAR1, and I'm on Twitter pretty often. I love to chat with everyone about different things, baseball or anything else. Mutual respect is key, of course, and yeah.
Wonderful. Karen, thank you so much for joining me for yet another Blue Jays talk. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Sean. Fun as always.
Anytime. And Steve, let everybody know how they can follow you, since you now have a whole bunch of free time on your hands with the election over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my Twitter feed is there for you on YouTube and Facebook Live at US of Jays. And I do want to answer one other question that was posed to us by Bob Ritchie. Would the 2021 Taijuan Walker excel against 1972 Dick Allen? So that would be 72 White Sox versus 2021 Blue Jays. And again, very similar teams. But I crunched numbers. I did several different simulations. And it turns out it's a trick question, because Taijuan Walker would go 2-0 on Dick Allen, and then Charlie Montoya would pull him, put somebody else in. Another pitcher would give up the home run. So really, Taijuan Walker would not give up the home run. And I say that only because please come join my new Facebook page, Fire Charlie Montoya.
Oh, man. And see, I just left that. So when Bob asked that question on the Jays from the Couch in our little group chat or whatever, I ignored it because I wasn't born. So I'm not experienced enough to have even entertained that scenario.
Steve, how are you going to feel if Charlie wins Manager of the Year this coming week?
Well, I'm no longer suicidal because Trump isn't president, but that could put me back.
Oh, stop.
Near hospitalization, yes.
No.
And then and it's 1972 Dick Allen, I would say one of the 5 most impressive offensive seasons of all time.
Well, there you
67 Yaz, Ruth 27. It's right in there. He was that terrific a player. But
awesome.
He was the Trevor Bauer of hitters.
Okay. All right. Steve says these things just to get a reaction, and I love it. Steve, thanks for joining us this week. I appreciate it. For everybody watching on YouTube or Facebook, thank you so much. Great questions coming in there as well. We really appreciate it that you're spending your evening with us. Couldn't ask for a better fan base, and we really appreciate that. So thank you. Remember, all of these broadcasts every week on YouTube Live and on Facebook Live as well. And of course, if you miss it, you can catch the audio version on Apple, Google, anywhere you find a podcast. You will find Jays from the Couch radio podcast there. Follow us on Twitter at Jays from Couch. And of course, as always, every single day, make sure you're checking out jaysfromthecouch.com for all your Blue Jays coverage. Thank you so much. So for everybody, for Steve, for Karen, for Trevor Bauer, and some guy who played a long time ago, this is Sean Doyle, hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.